When Darren called me that evening, his voice carried exhaustion, like a heavy coat he couldn't take off. "It's just temporary, Mom," he said, trying to sound upbeat. "A few months. We could really use your help." I didn't hesitate. He sounded overwhelmed managing his cafe, Melissa's demanding new job, and their twin toddlers who seemed to defy physics with their energy. I gave up my cozy one-bedroom apartment, the one near the bus stop, with the creaky floors and a leaky window that whistled during winter. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Still, the thought of being needed again, of mattering, lit something inside me. I packed my wedding photo, my favorite books, and my recipe binder I'd been writing in since 1982. I moved into their Tacoma basement. The ceilings were low. The mattress folded out from the wall and creaked like it was older than me. A space heater puffed to life whenever it pleased. But none of it mattered. I was close to my grandbabies. Every morning at 6, I was up making eggs and pancakes shaped like hearts, because Logan wouldn't eat them otherwise. I folded laundry, ran errands, cleaned bathrooms nobody else touched, and even helped reorganize Darren's cafe inventory, just because I remembered how. No one asked me to. I just did it. That's what family is for. Sometimes when Darren came home late from the closing shift, he'd give me a quick, tired hug. "Thanks, Mom," he'd mumble. It was short, but it kept me going. In those quiet basement nights, I'd sip tea and scroll through photos, Darren in his yellow jumper, his awkward prom tux, his first soccer game. I reminded myself I was part of something again. I mattered. Sure, Melissa sometimes talked over me at dinner. I missed my own space. But I brushed it off. I wasn't here for luxury. I was here for love. And for a while I believed it was enough. Days blurred into a rhythm of service. I rose before dawn to whisk pancakes into heart shapes, packed nursery bags, wiped noses, washed bottles. I tiny stitched a button back on Melissa's blouse, reorganized cafe shelves, so Darren could find the decaf without swearing. No one noticed the small miracles. That was fine. Mothers are born to be invisible until something goes wrong. Bills arrived in discreet envelopes that landed on the kitchen counter like warning shots. I saw Darren rub his temples while scrolling through cafe spreadsheets, heard Melissa mutter about ballooning mortgage rates. I offered to pick up a part-time night shift at the corner diner. They said, "No, Mom, just rest." So I kept cooking and folding, convincing myself my labor was worth more than any paycheck. Wednesday began like the others, laundry sorted by colors twins shrieking upstairs. I was halfway up the basement steps, balancing a basket of tiny socks, when Darren blocked the light. He didn't hug me. He handed me a manila envelope as though serving court papers. "We need to talk," he said. Inside was a tidy rent agreement, $600 per month due on the 1st, $50 late fee after 5 days. Bullet points marched across the page with military precision. My throat dried. "Rent," I whispered. "I cook, I clean. I mind the children." Melissa appeared, arms crossed. "Love can't pay utilities, Gloria. We're stretched thin." Her tone sliced. Darren's eyes slipped away as if afraid of catching mine. The basket slid from my arms. Socks tumbled like surrender flags. I gathered them, cheeks burning, managed a trembling nod. In that moment, I wasn't a mother, just an expense line on their ledger. Night fell thick and airless in the basement. I lay on the cot staring at the ceiling stain, shaped like a question mark. Around midnight, soft voices drifted through the vent. "She's not going to pay," Melissa said. "She doesn't have it," Darren murmured. "Just give her a deadline. I'm not running a charity. Charity after diapers, changed, lunches, packed toilets, scrubbed." My chest tightened, but tears refused to come. Shock held them hostage. I slipped upstairs, hovered behind the half-closed kitchen door. They planned around me as though I were furniture to be removed, discussing dates, amounts, contingencies. Something inside me cooled to steel. I patted back down, folded the rent notice into my recipe binder between blueberry scones and chicken pot pie relics of sweeter days. Then I reached for my old suitcase. It squeaked open like a stage curtain on the final act. One cardigan, 2 pairs of pants, a framed wedding photo enough. At dawn, the house was silent except for the refrigerator's hum. I placed the basement key on the counter beside a plate of heart-shaped pancakes that would grow cold. No note, no drama. Only the hiss of the front door closing behind me, a soft click that sounded strangely like freedom. The motel smelled like bleach and closed windows. The room was small, just a stiff bed, a stained lampshade, and wallpaper that peeled in the corners like old regrets. I sat on the edge of the mattress, holding the rent contract like a letter of exile. For 3 days, I hadn't heard from Darren. Not a call, not a text. Not even a simple, "Are you okay?" I stared at the walls, counting the little imperfections, paint bubbles, chipped corners. I thought of the home I had built with Darren's father. How we saved every penny for our first couch. How we celebrated every birthday with chocolate cake and mismatched candles. How had I ended up here, sitting in a room that smelled like abandonment I tried to eat? The microwave crackled as I heated up a can of soup. It tasted like metal and grief. I missed my own kitchen, my own spices, my seat at the table, where once people listened when I spoke. Night came. The silence was different here, not the kind filled with sleeping children or the hum of a house. This silence was hollow, echoing inside my ribs. I reached for my phone out of habit, hoping for some message, some sign that I still mattered. Nothing. I remembered every sandwich I cut the crusts off, every night I paced with a feverish baby. I wasn't asking for gratitude. I just didn't expect to be forgotten. By morning, I couldn't sleep. I pulled out an old file folder I'd kept in my bag, my name scrawled across it in fading ink. Inside were the things people forget to care about: Social Security card, hospital records from my nursing days, a faded Polaroid of me in scrubs. Then I saw it. An envelope, tucked between tax documents and birth certificates. My fingers paused. I recognized the handwriting. Mrs. Langford. She had been my last hospice client before I retired. I cared for her for over 5 months. I held her hand when her family didn't show up. I spoon-fed her when her hands failed. I listened when she cried at night. And one evening, just before she passed, she whispered, "You're more than staff, Gloria. You're the only family I had left." I had never opened the envelope. I told myself it was probably just a thank you card. But something pulled at me now, a need to be reminded that I had mattered to someone. I sat down at the motel desk, brushed away dust, and opened it slowly. Inside was a handwritten note. Elegant, deliberate penmanship. "Gloria, you were my sanity in my final days. I wanted you to be remembered for what you gave your patients, your presence, your heart. I took some steps to make sure of that. Love, Esther Langford." Underneath was a notarized legal document, a certificate of ownership. 51% of Sunlight Roasters, LLC. I blinked. Wait. Sunlight Roasters, that was Darren's Café. I turned the pages. Attached was the original agreement. 5 years ago, Darren had needed investment to open his dream cafe. I'd introduced him to Esther. She had liked his energy, but she told me afterward, "He's charming, but I trust you." She had invested Bud in my name. Quietly, without Darren knowing. Legally, the business wasn't just his. It was mine too. I stared at the signatures, mine, Esther's, and the lawyer's. I didn't remember signing it back then, just holding her hand while she said she had taken care of it all. I had thought I lost everything. But I had something real, something powerful. I wasn't just a burden with a suitcase anymore. I was a silent owner, a forgotten backbone of the business my son had tried to price me out of. That morning I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I just breathed. I was done begging to matter. Now I would take my place without permission. I woke before sunrise, the motel still dark, except for the blinking neon vacancy sign outside. The air tasted metallic, like the inside of an unplugged freezer. I folded Mrs. Langford's documents into a Ziploc bag, slipped them into my purse, and stepped into the chilly parking lot with a plan humming in my chest. First stop, a co-working space downtown, $10 for a day pass and access to a dusty printer that smelled of burnt toner. I scanned the ownership certificate, the operating agreement. Esther's letter, 3 neat PDFs that felt heavier than gold. I emailed them to a lawyer whose number I'd found at 3 a.m. after scrolling through reviews that mentioned ironclad NDAs and family business disputes resolved. His assistant replied within minutes. Come by at 11, bring everything. While waiting, I bought cheap coffee from a vending machine that hissed more than it poured. I almost laughed. Sunlight Roasters brewed beans so fragrant the whole block smelled like cinnamon every morning, and here I was sipping mud, but it steadied my hands. At the law office, dark wood panels whispered money. Mr. Keating, a silver-haired man with eyes like frost, read the papers without commentary, only nodding at each signature. Finally, he looked up. You realize, Mrs. Reyes, you have controlling interest. I do now, I said. He leaned back. And you want leverage, not destruction, I replied. The cafe is my son's dream. I just won't be treated like unpaid labor. Understood. First, we record these with the state. Then we draft a notice of change in managing membership. You'll need a business account, a mailing address. I'll handle the address, I said, picturing the florist shop I'd eyed on Maple Street, with a vacant studio above. He smiled. One more thing. The building lease is month to month. That's weak. If you own the property, your leverage multiplies. Those words unfurled inside me like banners. Own the building. I thanked him, signed retainer papers, and walked out, feeling 2 inches taller. Outside Sunlight Roasters, the morning rush was in full swing. Through the window, I saw Darren hustling Melissa at the register, forcing a thin smile. They hadn't noticed me. I dialed the number on the For Sale Inquire within sign, nailed to the brick facade. A man answered. Cash preferred, he said. Make it quick. We've got other bids. I'll have an offer by tomorrow. I replied, steady. Back at the motel, I spread papers across the bed like tarot cards and called my bank. Esther's modest estate fund still sat untouched, a nest egg she'd meant for me. Add my retirement savings and a small personal loan Mr. Keating could arrange, and the total matched the asking price to the dollar. That night, I packed again, this time with purpose, not shame. I booked the Maple Street studio, signed electronic forms, wired deposits. The florist downstairs promised the scent of freesia year-round. I fell asleep amid paperwork, ownership deeds, and the muted roar of possibility. 2 weeks later, the sold sticker went up on the cafe's sign. Darren posted a grinning selfie online, big things coming, because he assumed a friendly investor had swooped in. He didn't know the investor was his mother. I let the ink dry, let my new property manager draft the lease renewal. The increase was modest, $200 more a month, and a clause that required quarterly meetings with the majority owner, me. On a misty Thursday, the renewal arrived at the cafe. I knew because my phone buzzed seconds later. Darren, Mom, are you involved in this? Call me, please. I didn't answer. Instead, I placed a vase of fresh freesia on my new windowsill, opened my recipe binder, and copied the blueberry scone page onto crisp stationery, the first item I would add to the cafe's menu as co-owner. I didn't crave revenge. I craved respect. And respect I'd learned often arrives in the envelope of a well-timed contract. The first rent shock landed on a drizzly Monday. Darren opened the renewal packet from the new property manager and went pale. $200 more each month, effective immediately, plus a clause demanding quarterly meetings with the majority owner whose name was black-boxed behind GR. He must have known. Still, he texted me anyway. Darren, Mom, seriously. Are you involved? Darren, please answer. I didn't. Instead, I steeped chamomile in my Maple Street studio, the scent of freesia wafting through the window from the florist below. I had no appetite for rage. I savored stillness, letting my heartbeat settle into the rhythm of a woman no longer scrambling for permission. By Wednesday, the cafe felt the squeeze. The new lease arrived in Melissa's inbox. She slammed her laptop lid hard enough to rattle saucers. They tried a flash promotion, half-off lattes, buy one, get one muffins, anything to patch the hole. But promotions cost money too, and every cappuccino sold at a discount bled a little more from the bottom line. That night, Melissa pressed record on her phone, ring light gleaming in her eyes. She titled the video, "Families Should Support Each Other." Soft lighting tear shimmer a sigh as practiced as a theater cue. 3 years ago, we opened our home to my mother-in-law. She began voice wavering. We asked for nothing, just kindness. Then one day she vanished without explanation, and now someone doubled our rent. I watched in real time, anonymous among the viewers. Comments poured in. Why would your MIL leave for no reason? Show the full story. Convenient tears. Some sympathized, more probed. Screenshots of Darren's earlier post $600 basement rent fare surfaced. Sympathy thinned into skepticism. Skepticism into a low-grade storm of speculation. Meanwhile, I drafted a letter on cream stationery notice of first quarterly meeting. Sunlight Roasters, LLC. Agenda Line 1. Operational transparency. Line 2. Respectful workplace standards. I sealed it, slipped it under the cafe door after closing a quiet calling card in a sleeping storefront. Thursday morning, Darren found the envelope. Security footage easily accessed via the building's login I now controlled showed him pacing behind the counter letter, flapping in his fist. Melissa hovered mascara, smudged from last night's performance. They argued. Soundless video couldn't mask the heat in their gestures. I shut the feed, exhaled. No glee, no triumph. Just the calm ache of setting boundaries long overdue. Late afternoon, the twins' preschool posted photos of grandparents weak. Other kids sat on colorful mats between smiling elders. My grandsons were flanked by empty space. The sight pricked like citrus in a paper cut, but I held the image close. Absence teaches as sharply as presence. Friday, the bank notified Darren of the adjusted automatic rent withdrawal. The cafe account dipped below safe margin. He fired off another message, this one shorter roar. Darren, why are you doing this? I typed. Deleted, retyped. Finally, I sent 2 sentences. I'm enforcing what was always mine. When we meet, we'll discuss respect. Read receipt flashed. Reply never came. That evening, I baked blueberry scones, my recipe, the one that once sweetened Darren's birthdays. I plated 2, carried them to the community center down the block, where a seniors' craft fair raised funds for after-school programs. The organizer beamed as I donated the pastries to the bake sale. Small, almost invisible, but impact often begins in whispers. I walked home beneath street lamps, shimmering in the drizzle freesia scent, stronger after rain. The city felt quieter than usual, as if holding breath before a turning page. In my pocket lay the cafe's financial statements. Mr. Keating had forwarded numbers that told stories faster than words, rising supply costs, stagnant foot traffic. Marketing spend spiraling under panic. A business can recover from bad months. What it cannot survive is arrogance unchecked. Back in my studio, I opened a fresh journal titled Second Bloom. On the first page, I wrote Lesson 1, Love. Given freely is priceless. Love, taxed becomes toxic. Lesson 2, silence wielded wisely is not weakness. It is orchestration. I set down the pen, sipped cool tea, and let the night settle. The storm was only beginning, but this time, I wasn't bracing against it. I was steering it. Monday morning arrived draped in gray clouds and the scent of overwatered soil. I dressed in navy slacks and a soft blouse, clipped my hair back, and carried a manila folder beneath my arm. I wasn't going to the cafe. As someone's mother, I was arriving as its majority owner. The bell above the cafe door jingled as I entered. Darren looked up from the counter. His face froze. "Mom." He breathed like the word had edges. Melissa emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. Her eyes narrowed. "I'm here for our quarterly meeting," I said evenly. We sat in the back office, the one I used to help organize years ago, now cluttered with papers and stress. I laid out the agenda, a printed sheet with 2 bullet points and a signature line. Darren shifted in his seat. "You bought the building." "I did." "You've been watching us struggle and said nothing." I met his gaze. "I watched you hand me a rent invoice instead of asking how I was. I watched you let me leave without checking if I was safe. Now I'm here, as owner." Melissa scoffed. "You're here to punish us?" "No. I'm here to run a business and make sure no one is exploited again, including me." They said nothing. I moved on. The lease increase stands. It's still below market rate. And as per this clause, I pointed, "You'll now submit quarterly reports. Profits, losses, payroll." Darren bristled. "We don't need micromanaging. You don't need a lifeline either, right?" I replied calmly. "But you took one. You just didn't know who gave it." There was silence, and then slowly Melissa reached across the desk and picked up the agenda. Her eyes scanned the lines, stopping at the final note. "Rebranding proposal? Sunlight Roasters. A family revival. You want to stay involved?" I nodded. "I want the place to thrive, but not on my silence. Not anymore." For the first time in that meeting, Darren's expression cracked something like guilt, or maybe the first stirrings of humility. I didn't know he said. "You didn't ask," I replied. I didn't slam doors or raise my voice. That was the luxury of having power on paper. My words didn't need to be loud. They just had to be true. The meeting ended quietly. I left the folder on the desk and exited the same way I'd come in. Not as a tenant, not as a mother begging for a place, but as a woman who had built things quietly for years and finally claimed her name on the deed. At home, I put on an old jazz record and opened a bottle of sparkling water. The sky outside had begun to clear. Freesia from the florist below curled through the window like an exhale. I sat at my desk, pen in hand, writing the next chapter of the Second Bloom Journal. Lesson 3. Forgiveness doesn't require forgetfulness. It requires boundaries and a clear title in your name. The cafe's Instagram page grew frantic. Buy 1, get 2. Limited time, family-owned community. Loved Darren and Melissa were trying everything, hashtags, gift card raffles, even featuring the twins in an apron-clad reel. It reeked of desperation. The comments began shifting tone. "Didn't your MIL leave suddenly? What's with the rent drama? Seems like you're hiding something." I said nothing. I hadn't posted in years. But sometimes silence isn't retreat. It's preparation. On a soft sunlit morning, I positioned my phone on a small stand, angled just so the daylight streamed across my kitchen table. No filters, no tears, just truth. "Hello," I began. "My name is Gloria Reyes. I've been quiet for some time, but I believe it's time to clarify." I held up the ownership certificate to Sunlight Roasters, then the building deed, Then a copy of Esther Langford's notarized letter. I never turned on anyone. I invested. I contributed. I built quietly. When I was handed a rent invoice for living in my son's basement, I walked away with dignity. And now I've simply returned on paper, not in fury. No rant, no names named, just documents and calm sentences. The video was less than 3 minutes. By lunch, it had over 20,000 views. By dinner, it had a lawyer's reaction video. By nightfall, Melissa had posted again this time, tearful, saying she'd been blindsided and ambushed. But the tide had turned. People began digging. One YouTuber posted a side-by-side comparison, Melissa's first video with shaky accusations versus my calm documentation. Viewers weren't fooled anymore. Gloria's not attacking. She's reclaiming, someone commented. That's not revenge. That's justice. I didn't check notifications, didn't reply to texts. I changed my number, updated security on every account, and left the rest to float in the current. That weekend, I passed the cafe on my way to the farmer's market. A printed sign in the window read, "New management guidelines effective immediately." A young barista I didn't recognize handed me a coffee. "You're Gloria?" she asked, eyes wide. "You're kind of a legend." I smiled softly. "Just a woman with a paper trail," I said. The cafe felt different. Not in its layout, but in the air. Lighter. As if everyone knew the silence had broken and the dust had settled on truth. I donated the week's profit to a local library for their Books for Seniors program. I didn't attach my name. I didn't need to. Back at home, I added to the Second Bloom journal. Lesson 4. Sometimes the only weapon you need is a well-organized file folder. Lesson 5. Vindication tastes better without bitterness. I sipped tea, leaned back in my chair, and let the last light of the afternoon brush across my face. They tried to forget me. Now the world remembered, not because I shouted, but because I showed the receipts. News travels fastest through holes in reputations. Within a week of my quiet 3-minute video, Melissa's curated life began to fray like cheap ribbon under rain. Her sponsorship emails dried up. First brands don't like unstable storylines. PTA officers removed her from the fundraising committee, citing ongoing family matters. A local paper picked up the story with the headline, "Mompreneur" or "Monster-in-law." The documents say otherwise. Darren tried to steady the cafe, but numbers don't obey sentiment. A supplier refused further credit until the outstanding bill was cleared. Their espresso machine broke a gasket. The repair quote looked brutal beside their thinning ledger. I watched from a polite distance and offered no opinion. Sometimes growth needs quiet ground. Monday, 8 a.m., our second quarterly meeting convened. I arrived with croissants and the latest profit and loss statement. Darren looked exhausted, eyes rimmed red. Melissa sat stiff, phone face down on the desk like a silenced accomplice. I spoke first. We have 2 choices: scale back and stabilize, or expand strategically with proper investment and transparency. I slid a new proposal across the table, a community roasting class series, an anniversary block party, a loyalty program integrated with local bakeries. Melissa lifted her head. "Why help us now?" "Because the cafe is still a good idea," I said. "Because mistakes don't cancel potential. And because I don't believe in wasting a second chance." Darren's shoulders dropped. "Mom, I'm sorry." It wasn't a grand apology, but it was the first true one. I nodded, letting it sit between us like a seed needing water. We voted. The motion passed: implement the plan, hire a part-time accountant, and update the social media voice to reflect authenticity over Polish. Melissa blinked at that line. Authenticity was a language she had almost forgotten. That afternoon, the cafe posted a single black and white photo, Darren pouring latte art, beside a caption that read, "Building back one cup at a time." Thank you for holding us accountable. Comments flooded in skeptical, yet curious. Away from the glare, I kept nurturing my own life. I mailed out the first round of Second Bloom scholarships, 5 envelopes to women over 60 caring for grandchildren alone. Each contained a modest check and a handwritten note. Your story isn't finished. Keep writing. I signed only with an initial G. Evenings I painted seascapes from my window, waves carrying shards of sunset, gulls balanced on wind. Art reminded me that motion and stillness could share the same canvas. One night, Darren knocked on my studio door. No camera crew. No pleading text, just my son. He entered awkwardly holding a small cardboard box. Inside lay my old recipe binder, newly repaired. Its worn leather had been restitched. I thought this belonged here, he said. And if you have time, maybe you could teach me one recipe a week for the new menu section, Grandma Gloria's Classics. A request, not a demand. Respect wrapped in humility. I traced the fresh stitches with my thumb. All right, I said softly. He lingered in the doorway. Will you ever move back in? I smiled, not bitter, simply clear. I have a life here now, but my doors open when the invitation is rooted in respect, not convenience. He nodded, eyes glossy. When he left, the hallway smelled faintly of freesia. I added 2 more lines to the journal. Lesson 6. When masks fall, some faces crumble, others finally breathe. Lesson 7. Help offered freely is a gift. Help coerced is a chain. And the night felt lighter, as if something heavy had rolled off the horizon and slipped quietly into the sea. Change doesn't always arrive with trumpets. It arrives in routines. 2 months passed since the second quarterly meeting. The cafe had stabilized. The loyalty program caught on. Customers now collected stamps for free pastries from local bakeries. The roasting classes filled up quickly, especially the one titled Coffee with Grandma Gloria, which I taught on Sunday mornings wearing an apron stitched with sunflowers. Darren stopped correcting me mid-sentence. Melissa stopped performing kindness like a stage role. There was less tension, more teamwork, still imperfect but honest. Behind the counter, a new chalkboard read Menu Additions, Gloria's Classics, Spiced Apple Muffins, Carrot Pineapple Cake, Blueberry Scones. Each item came with a tiny handwritten note in the display, from my binder to your table. G. One Tuesday afternoon, a reporter from a regional food magazine stopped by. She didn't mention the drama of the viral video, or even Melissa's past posts. She only asked about the recipes and the story behind them. I told her about Esther Langford, about handwritten labels, and why my scone dough rests for 12 minutes, never 10. The article came out a week later, The Woman Who Took Back Her Café with a Smile and a Recipe Binder. No mention of revenge, just legacy. But what bloomed even more brightly was the Second Bloom Fund. Word had spread quietly but steadily. Letters arrived every week, trembling handwriting stories of loss of resilience. Grandmothers in Detroit, raising 4 grandchildren alone. A woman in Oregon rebuilding her life after her daughter's addiction left her raising a toddler again. We mailed small checks, care packages, and cards that said, "We see you." No PR, no press kits, just impact. One Saturday, a woman named Rosetta came to my roasting class. 63 gray curls like silver fireworks, and a laugh that shook the ceiling. "You're the one behind Second Bloom, aren't you?" she asked during our coffee break. I smiled. I may know something about it. She held my hand. "You saved me, Miss Gloria. And you didn't even know it." I didn't need anything more than that. At the next quarterly meeting, we voted to partner with a local women's shelter. Proceeds from every Gloria's Classic item would go toward vocational scholarships for elder caregivers. Melissa proposed it. Darren seconded. When the vote passed, we didn't clap. We just nodded. That was enough. After the meeting, I found a small envelope tucked into my recipe binder. Inside was a letter in Darren's handwriting. Dear Mom, you didn't shout. You didn't shame. You just showed us how to do better. You didn't want to be above us. You just wanted to be beside us. I see that now. Thank you for never closing your door, even when I shut mine. Love, Darren. I didn't cry. Not then. I folded the letter and placed it next to the oldest recipe in my binder. Lesson 8. I wrote that night. Healing doesn't always look like hugs. Sometimes it looks like muffins shared in silence. I didn't attend the cafe's 4th anniversary party. Not out of bitterness, but because it no longer defined me. I helped them plan it, reviewed the flyer, offered vendor contacts, even baked 3 dozen carrot pineapple cupcakes for the dessert table. But when the day came, I stayed home. That morning I sat on my porch overlooking the sea. The florist downstairs had left a bouquet of white freesias by my door with a note that read, "To the root that made things bloom." I smiled, placed the bouquet on the windowsill, and brewed myself a cup of coffee. Sunlight Roaster's newest roast, a blend I'd helped design. Smooth, citrusy, and strong. Around midday, I opened my laptop and drafted a letter. Not to Darren or Melissa. Not to Esther Langford, but to myself. Dear Gloria, you gave, you endured, you forgave. You walked out not with anger, but with grace. You returned not to prove something, but to restore what was rightfully yours. And in doing so, you found more than power. You found peace. I folded the letter and placed it in the back of my Second Bloom journal. Then, for the first time in a long while, I closed the cover not to end it, but to let it rest. That evening I walked down to the beach barefoot. The tide was low, the sky painted in lavender and gold. No crowds, no cameras, no noise. Just waves breathing steadily like memory softened by time. I thought about everything: the rent invoice, the motel, the silence, the documents, the cafe, the recipes, the scholarship letters. But none of it hurt anymore. Not because it didn't matter, but because I no longer carried it like a wound. Sometimes I realized healing doesn't come with closure. It comes with opening to your worth, your voice, your space. A family once treated me like an afterthought, but life reminded me I was the beginning of the sentence. On my walk back, I passed a chalk drawing on the sidewalk outside the cafe, a stick figure grandma beside a big coffee cup drawn by one of the twins. Below it, in shaky handwriting, was a caption, "Grandma Gloria makes it better." I paused. My eyes watered not with pain, but with something gentler. Then I kept walking. At home I set a new journal beside the old one. The cover was blank, the pages unwritten, but the pen was in my hand, and for once the story was entirely mine. If you've listened this far, maybe you're carrying something too. Maybe you're a mother who gave everything only to be told she owed more. Maybe you're a grandmother picking up the pieces after someone else's choices. Maybe you're just someone who feels forgotten. This story wasn't just about rent or a cafe or a set of legal documents. It was about worth, the kind of worth that isn't tied to a paycheck, a title, or a thank you text. It's about the invisible work, the folded laundry. The bruises kissed, the hearts steadied in the middle of someone else's storm. We've been told our love should be quiet. Our sacrifice is automatic. We've been told asking for respect is selfish. We've been told too often that we are extra weight, extra cost, extra mouth. But here's what I've learned. We are not extra. We are essential. We are the scaffolding. We are the glue. And sometimes we must remind others of our value not with rage, but with receipts, not with noise, but with unwavering truth. I didn't ruin anyone's life. I saved my own. And by doing so, I lit a lantern for others to see their own path. If you're in a motel room tonight, holding on to a piece of your past and wondering if you still matter, listen, you do. You always did. You don't have to scream. You don't have to beg. You don't even have to be invited back. You just have to remember who you are. And if they made you feel like a burden, let me tell you something. You were never baggage. You were the foundation. I'll say that again for the people in the back. You were never baggage. You were the foundation. And now it's your turn to build. Quietly or boldly. Alone or with others. But on your terms. With your name on the deed. And your hand holding the pen. Because this chapter is yours.